So we're going to create a application using Google Maps, and what it's going to be is a route planning application for cyclists, runners and joggers and walkers, I guess. And what it's going to be is it will allow you to create circular routes based on a home location. So if I was using this application, I would first search using a search box for my current or home location. So I'd enter in, for example, Newtown. That would then center the map on Newtown and zoom in to an appropriate level. So I can now see the streets and towns and the lie of the land around Newtown. So now I'm sitting down planning my route, and the way I'd do that would be to start clicking on intermediate points through which I want my route to pass. So going back a step, I'd first click on my home location. That sets the home location. I would then start picking points that I want to pass through, and I'd click on them. And I'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the application, as I'm clicking on these points, will be calculating a route that passes through each of those points. And then finally, the last leg will take me back to my home location. And that will all be happening as I'm clicking on these waypoints. I'll be able to add additional waypoints if, say, I want to also pass through Randwick as well. So if I clicked here, it would recalculate to go via Randwick as well as Bondi Beach. I would be able to, if I subsequently decided not to pass through Randwick, I could click again on that waypoint and it will remove it, and it will revert back to the route that just goes around this way here. Additionally, if I wanted to modify the route to go through Bronte, instead of Bondi Beach, I would click to drag that waypoint, and I would drag it down to this location here, and the route again will recalculate itself. What else? It would be really nice to have an elevation profile, and that would be a running display of how much hill climbing is required along the route as you pass along the route. So if I was a cyclist who wanted to avoid hills, then I could see from the elevation profile that there's too much hill climbing, and I would then grab and drag and adjust my waypoints to avoid those hills. There'd also be a total mileage, and so if I was going for a particular target mileage, say 30 miles, then I once again can drag and drop my markers, my waypoints, to adjust the route accordingly to be longer or shorter. And that's basically it. That's basically what the app is going to be. I think the key would be to keep it fairly simple. The final cherry on the cake, as it were, would be to allow downloading of the final route as a GPS file, or a file suitable for devices such as a Garmin or whatever fitness tracker you currently use. So then you would be able to plan your route on the computer, nice circular route, and plan it to avoid hills, plan it to be the appropriate mileage, and then download it, and off you go. So that's the idea of this application, we're going to build it using the Google Maps JavaScript API. It's a very easy to use API, but it's also very powerful. Gives you a lot of options that you can play with and coordinate them all together to create a finished product. The nice thing about JavaScript, of course, is that we can develop our application in a text editor and prototype our work in a web browser without any further special software or tools or back-end servers or any other layers of software or hardware or middleware. So that's it. Let's look a bit more closely at the Google Maps JavaScript API before we get started. So the basic concepts that you have is obviously just displaying a simple map and various types, and that's the obvious part. But you can create markers arbitrarily, programmatically. Info windows that are kind of like pop-up windows to guide the user towards their end goal. Shapes. Now the thing that's really going to be key for this particular idea is the directions API. So you can just send it an origin, latitude, longitude pair, and a destination too, and also a number of waypoints, and it will, as well as which kind of travel mode that you're using, for example bicycling, and it will respond back to you with the optimal route between all those points based on the mode of travel. So what else is there? We've got the Places API as well, which I think will be key for this. So that just allows you to enter some search text, and it auto-completes, gives you suggestions, and when you select one, it centers the map on that search result and zooms in appropriately. So that would be, I think, the first thing the user would do is they would search for their home location, and once that comes up, they'll start clicking to add intermediate points for their circular route. So is that everything? Elevation, that was the other thing. A nice to have, and I think quite doable, would be an elevation profile. So again, you've just got a bunch of points that you're going to travel through. In fact, you have a lot of points, because once the directions service comes back with the actual route, it's going to be more than just your waypoints. It's going to be every turn, so you'd have to calculate an elevation profile over that. Quite doable, I think. So we could make a really quick start. The point I thought to start from is really just loading a simple map up so we get an idea of what we're working with here. So for the first bit then, I'm going to just copy paste this block of code, and we'll go over what it's doing in a moment. So I've got a directory for the files, and I'm going to just call this 0 because it's the very first iteration of this product. HTML file, nothing fancy. I'm using the Vim text editor, my editor of choice. So what have we got? We've got a HTML file, the usual gubbins in there, a bit of styling. Here's our JavaScript. So this line here, then we download the public or the generally available Google Maps API. It's not open source, so if you were to go and view this in your web browser, you would see that it's minified and obfuscated. So it's not human readable, it's not open source. Now here's another script, and this is us actually initializing our own state. We have a variable for the map. We declare a function which isn't going to be executed quite yet, and then we make a call, our first call into the API itself, the Maps API itself. What we're saying is add an event listener that listens on the state of the DOM, of the document object model, which is just a standard JavaScript web browser concept, which is just really the page and life cycle of the page. And what we're doing is we're passing an implicit reference in JavaScript, an implicit variable that points to the window, the current window. And we're saying it's the load event we're interested in, and we're saying when this event occurs, call this function, initialize, which is here. So we're telling Google Maps API, hey, here's the window that we're loading into. When it loads, call that function. When this function is called, so this will happen on load, which is when you very first open the page in your browser. So when this function is called, what it's going to do is create a map instance, and we know how to construct one of those. We just give it the div, which is the element that contains the map in the HTML source, and some options. Going back to our code, we're creating a new instance of this object. We're indeed passing a reference to the div in our HTML file called map canvas. That's what's going to hold our map. You see here, within the body of our page, we have the div ID map canvas. That's going to hold our map. So we use JavaScript. We use a standard built-in JavaScript function call to get a reference to that div. Why do we do that? Because we can then do things programmatically with the result of this function call. There's all sorts of methods that we can call on that div to do things like make it visible or invisible, or change attributes on it, add content to it, remove content from it, etc. In this case, we're just saying, hey, give us a map instance attached to this div, and we're passing it some options which we just looked at. Those options are represented by a JavaScript object that's just contained within curly braces. It just has attributes, name and value pairs, the zoom level of the map, and the center location that the map is centered around. So zoom is 8, which is sort of moderate, and the center, the latitude longitude value here is something we'll find out. So that's it. That's basic idea here. It's just a very simple file that fits on one page. Simple starting point. I'm not going to go too much into the style stuff here. It's just making the map 100% tall and doesn't have any space around it. That's basically it. So let's have a quick look then at how this looks. Okay, so there we go. There is our map. It's a very simple starting point. We can pan and zoom. Nothing particularly interesting at this point. It's just out of the box. So next step then, I think, for this particular application is a search function. Just a little search box here which gives us the drop-down list of autocomplete matches, location matches, and the ability to select one of those places, and when you select it, it will center the map on that result, as well as setting the zoom to some appropriate value.